guys, welcome back to GCCKids Connections, where we're connecting with each other while you're home from school, and we're connecting with some really good books and also connecting with God's Word. Today we're going to read a book called Small Gifts in God's Hands. And it's a special kind of or type of writing. In school, you're learning about fiction, nonfiction, poetry, those kinds of things, biographies. Well, this particular book would fall into the category of historical fiction. And that means that while the author, who is Max Lucado, made the story up, or he wrote the story, or invented some of the characters in the story, it's based on things that really did happen. So the events in this book really did happen. You can read about them in the Bible. In fact, that'll be part of our challenge. But some of the characters are made up characters, so it would be historical fiction. And so I hope you enjoy Small Gifts in God's Hands.
"Mother, people are still coming," Elijah said as he stood and looked out the window of their small house. His mother, Miriam, glanced up from her work. "Is he still in the boat?" "Yes, he's still in Uncle Peter's boat." "And what are they doing?" Elijah squinted in the morning sun. "He's speaking to all the people. May I go hear him?" "Is your work done?" "No, but it can wait. He may be gone." "If you don't finish your chores, I will not have any bread or fish to sell. You may go after you've finished." As Elijah headed outside to clean the oven, he said to his mother, "Some of the boys say the teacher Jesus is from God, Mother. Is he?" Miriam brushed back stray hairs from her forehead. Her dark eyes smiled at her 10-year-old son. "I don't know, Elijah, but if he is, he would want you to clean the oven." The boy smiled and went to do his job. Miriam saw a glimpse of his father. Elijah had the same contagious smile, dimpled chin, and even the bushy eyebrows lifted the same way as his father's. He was a good boy. She depended on his help now with the chores, and right now the oven needed cleaning. The job was big because the oven was big. Elijah's father had built a large oven for the inn that he hoped to have one day. Then came the illness and his death. Now the big oven, a small house, and a sweet memory were all they had left. But Miriam and Elijah had made the best of it. Every day they prepared food to sell to fishermen and travelers. While Elijah cleaned the oven, his mother prepared the bread. While she baked the bread, he went to the shore to buy the fish. And while she cooked the fish, Elijah set out the baskets for the food. They would not get rich, but they wouldn't go hungry either. "Elijah! Elijah!" It was Aaron, Elijah's cousin and best friend. Elijah raised up so quickly he bumped his head on the oven. "Aaron, you scared me." "Come see what the teacher did. My father's boat is so full of fish it's almost sinking. None of the fishermen caught anything all night, and then the teacher convinced them to try again, and now father's boat and another boat are overflowing with fish." Elijah looked toward his mother. She was standing in the doorway holding a basket, the one he used to carry fish from the shore. She handed him the basket, smiling her approval, and the two boys were off and running. Within moments, the two boys were in the thick of the crowd, elbowing their way to where the boats were pulled ashore. Just as Aaron had said, the boats were so full that fish were tumbling over the sides and splashing back into the water. Aaron's father, Peter, was talking loudly and gesturing wildly. The teacher, Jesus, was sitting on the edge of the boat, feet in the sand, smiling. He seemed to be enjoying the moment. Every so often, he would chuckle and shake his head at Peter's descriptions. It was after one such chuckle that his eyes met with Elijah's. Elijah gathered up the fish and hurried home to tell his mother what the teacher had done. She laughed at his imitation of Peter's excitement. "Mother, the teacher looked right at me." Elijah stopped and thought for a moment. "You know how it feels when the morning sun chases the chill off the sea? It was like that when Jesus looked at me. It felt warm and happy." Later that day, when all the chores were done, Elijah was still talking about the fish in Peter's boat. "Mother, Uncle Peter let the teacher use a boat. I wish we had something that he could use." He looked around at the tiny house. There wasn't much to see. The jars and cooking pots and baskets, the broom in the corner, the lamp, and the mats on the floor. "We don't have anything big enough to give." Miriam touched her son's cheek. "If the teacher is who he says he is, the size of the gift doesn't matter. God can do big things with little gifts." Elijah shrugged and sighed, but said nothing. It was a week before Elijah heard that Jesus was back in the village. This time it was Joseph, Aaron's neighbor, who came running with the news. "He asked my father if he could borrow our house this afternoon. He's there right now, and it's so full." The three hurried to Joseph's house, but there was no way that they could see the teacher. Every doorway was packed. People were sitting in the windowsills. 4 men had even gone up onto the roof and lowered someone on a mat down through a hole. Joseph's father had the largest house in town, and it still couldn't hold all the people. "I'd love for him to use our house," Elijah told his mother that night as they rolled up their bed mats. "But it wouldn't do any good. It's too small. Everything we have is small." Miriam smiled and put her arms around her boy. "Remember what I said, son. If Jesus is who he says he can do big things with small gifts." The next day, Elijah and Miriam went to a special meal at Peter's house. Everyone had questions about the teacher. Peter told story after story about Jesus. One caught Elijah's attention. It was about a woman and a jar of perfume. When she heard Jesus was in town, she went to where he was eating and poured perfume on his feet. While the story inspired everyone else, it discouraged Elijah. He wanted so badly to give something to Jesus, but he had no expensive perfume. He had no house. He had no boat. He had nothing. "Still wishing you had something big to give Jesus?" Elijah's mother asked as they were walking home. He nodded. "As I've said, if the teacher is who they say he is, he doesn't need big things." I know, Elijah interrupted. "God can do big things with a small gift." Miriam smiled at her son. "I've been thinking," she said. "Let's get up early tomorrow and go hear what the teacher has to say. Peter says he's not far from here." Elijah was so excited he could hardly sleep that night for thinking about Jesus. When Elijah awoke, the sun had yet to appear. Careful not to disturb his mother, he filled a basket with fish and bread to take with them. By the time Miriam awoke, both her son and the food were ready to go. Soon the two of them were climbing the hillside with many others who were also going to hear Jesus. It took them a long time. Elijah had never seen so many people. There were thousands. Aaron had saved a space for them in the front. The time passed quickly as they sat on the grass, listening to Jesus teach and watching him heal the sick. A long line of people waited to see Jesus, the teacher. Parents with children, people with crutches, elderly with frail backs and weak eyes, all wanted a moment with Jesus. Aaron pointed to his father, Peter, in the group huddled beside Jesus. "They're worried about the size of the crowd. I heard them asking, 'How in the world are we going to feed all these people?'" About that time, the group of men walked toward Jesus. "You must tell these people to go home," one man said. "They're tired and we have no food to feed them." Jesus looked over at the crowd and then back at his father's. "You feed them." The men were silent. How could they feed them with the little food they had with so many people? "If only we had brought more food," Miriam said sadly. What we have is so small." Elijah smiled. He knew exactly what to do. "If Jesus is who he says he is, Mother, he can do big things with a small gift." Elijah picked up the basket he had packed with bread and fish that morning. As he took it to one of Jesus' followers, Elijah looked at the teacher, and when he did, Jesus looked back at him and smiled. Elijah didn't know what would happen, but he knew something would happen. The follower gave the basket to Jesus. The teacher took the food and then looked into the heavens and prayed. What happened next, Elijah would never forget. It was as if the basket had no bottom. People pulled out one piece of bread after another, one fish after another. Every person on the hillside was fed, and there was food left over. At one point, as the people were eating, Elijah noticed that Jesus was looking at him. When Elijah looked back, the teacher smiled, and when Jesus smiled, Elijah's heart felt warm and happy, the way it did the day when he saw Jesus by the boats. Elijah never forgot that look, and he never forgot what he learned. He remembered both many, many years later as he and Aaron and Peter stood on the hill near Jerusalem. They watched from a distance as the teacher was hung on a cross. All three of them were very sad. He's giving his life as a gift to save the world, his uncle said sadly. But he's just one life, said Aaron, and the whole world is big. How can one life save everyone? It seemed like such a small gift. Elijah squeezed his uncle's hand and smiled because he knew the answer. No gift is small in God's hands.
Wow, isn't it incredible how God can take our small gifts and use them to do really great things for His glory and for our good. So I have a couple of challenges for you regarding this book, and then a challenge related to our story tomorrow. Online, you'll be able to find a worksheet that looks like this. It's called Stories of Jesus. And so what I'd like you to do is see how many of the stories from Jesus' life that were portrayed in this book can you remember? Like, what are some of the things that Jesus was doing? What Bible stories do you remember that were part of this story? So I'd like you to list them and then see if you can find where they are found in the Bible. That's a pretty big challenge, but I think if you work on it together as a family, you can identify all of the stories that were part of this book. I also have a second challenge for you today, and it's regarding the book that we're going to do tomorrow. I'd like you to think about what love looks like. So if I said to you, I would like you to draw a tree, it would be very simple. You would draw a trunk and you would draw some branches and some leaves, because we all know what a tree looks like. We see trees all the time. But love is a little different concept. It's not something that you can actually see or touch like you can a tree or a dog or a flower. But I want you to think about, what would love look like? If you could draw a picture that would show what love looks like, what would you draw? So think about it, and if you get some pictures done, send me a picture via email or text it to me, and we'll see how your pictures describe what you think love looks like. And come back tomorrow, because you'll find out why I had you do that when we read a story tomorrow. So have a good afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow in Kids Connection.